The day after the meeting with Karen, I woke up still feeling that mix of irritation and determination. My kids were having breakfast, their little faces lighting up when they talked about playing outside. I could tell they didn't fully understand why they weren't allowed, only that it made them sad. That sadness hit me like a punch in the chest. I wasn't just going to tell them to stay inside and deal with it. I wanted them to have a place where they could laugh and run without fear of complaints. The idea of building a playground wasn't just some spur-of-the-moment thought anymore. It was a mission. I pulled out a notebook and started sketching ideas. Slides, swings, monkey bars, maybe even a small climbing wall. I wanted it to be something special, something that made their eyes go wide the moment they saw it. I called up a few friends to ask if they had spare materials. One of them had old wooden beams from a shed they tore down. Another had some rope and metal chains from an old swing set. My garage quickly turned into a construction zone. Every evening after work, I was out there measuring, cutting, hammering. My kids kept peeking through the window, trying to guess what I was making, but I kept saying, "You'll see soon enough." I knew Karen was watching from her house across the street. Every time I looked up, I could see her blinds twitching just a little, like she was trying to keep tabs on me. I could almost hear her wondering what I was up to. Halfway through the build, I ran into my first problem. The ground wasn't level. If I didn't fix it, the whole playground would tilt, and that wouldn't be safe. I had to dig, shovel, and repack the dirt until the base was solid. It took hours, and my back was screaming by the end of it. But when I stepped back and saw the structure starting to take shape, I knew it was worth it. This wasn't just about swings and slides. It was about showing my kids, and maybe even Karen, that no one was going to take away their right to play. By the time I installed the first swing, my kids were jumping up and down with excitement. I let them test it out for a few minutes, and the sound of their laughter filled the air. It was like the entire yard came alive. Of course, that's when Karen showed up. She didn't step onto my property, but she stood just close enough to make sure I saw her scowl. She shook her head slowly, like she thought she was the neighborhood sheriff laying down the law. I didn't say anything. I just kept working. The next day, I tackled the slide. I'd managed to find one online from someone giving it away for free. The only problem, it was bright neon green, and it stuck out like a sore thumb. Honestly, I loved it. It practically shouted fun from a mile away. Installing it was tricky. I had to bolt it securely so no one would get hurt. My kids kept asking if they could try it yet, but I told them, not until it's ready. They groaned but listened. Safety first, even if they didn't fully get it. One evening, as the sun was setting, I was out there painting some of the wood panels bright colors. That's when a couple of neighborhood kids walked by. They stopped at the edge of my yard and just stared. "Is that a playground?" one of them asked. I nodded, and their faces lit up. "Can we play on it when it's done?" I smiled and said, "Of course." The thought of kids from all over the neighborhood running around together made me even more determined to finish. But Karen wasn't done trying to interfere. 2 days later, I got a letter in my mailbox. No stamp, no envelope, just a piece of paper with big, bold handwriting. It said, "This playground is a violation of neighborhood rules. Remove it immediately." I laughed out loud. The handwriting was so obviously hers. I crumpled it up and tossed it in the trash. I wasn't about to let some self-appointed enforcer tell me how to use my own yard. I doubled down on my work. I added a small sandbox in the corner and even built a little bench for parents to sit and watch their kids play. I imagined summer afternoons with the sound of laughter, the smell of barbecue, and the sight of kids chasing each other around. Every nail I hammered felt like I was building more than just wood and rope. I was building a statement. The day I finished, I didn't announce it. I just let my kids walk outside and see it for themselves. The look on their faces was pure magic. They ran to the swings, climbed the slide, and filled the yard with joy. Soon enough, the neighborhood kids started showing up too. It was everything I hoped for. Kids of all ages playing together, sharing, laughing. Karen stood across the street, arms crossed, her expression as sour as ever. But this time, she didn't say a word. She just watched, maybe realizing she couldn't stop this. I knew she'd probably keep trying in her own passive-aggressive way, but I didn't care. This wasn't about her anymore. It was about the kids. That night, as I tucked my kids into bed, they thanked me over and over again. "Best dad ever," one of them whispered before drifting off to sleep. And in that moment, I knew all the late nights, sore muscles, and Karens. Glares were worth it, because no matter what, I'd built more than a playground. I'd built a place for happiness to grow, and no one could take that away. It all started on a bright Saturday morning, the kind where the sun feels warmer than usual and the air smells like fresh grass. My kids were laughing in the backyard, chasing each other with toy airplanes, their laughter floating up to the open sky. It was one of those simple, perfect moments you wish you could bottle up and keep forever. But then she appeared. Karen, my next-door neighbor with her arms folded, lips pressed so tight you'd think smiling was a crime. She leaned over the fence and said it like she was delivering a court order. "Your kids aren't allowed to play outside anymore. It's disturbing the peace." I thought she was joking. How could the sound of children playing be disturbing? But her expression didn't change. She meant it. And in that instant, the joy in my backyard vanished. At first, I laughed it off. Surely she was just having a bad day. But over the next week, every time my kids stepped outside, she'd yell at them, "Too loud!" or "Go inside!" She even complained to the homeowners association. I started to notice my kids hesitating before opening the back door, their little shoulders slumping when they saw her peeking through her blinds. That crushed me. My kids are good kids. They don't scream for no reason or damage anything. All they wanted was to play in the fresh air like normal children. That night, after tucking them in, I sat at the kitchen table thinking about my own childhood. I remembered long summer evenings playing tag until the streetlights came on, building forts in the woods and laughing until my stomach hurt. No one told us to stop. No one made us feel like a nuisance for being kids. And now here was this neighbor trying to take that away from my children. I wasn't going to let it happen. That's when the idea hit me. What if I didn't just let my kids play outside? What if I made the ultimate outdoor space for them? Something so incredible, so inviting, that it would drown out Karen's complaints in pure, undeniable joy. I knew it wouldn't be easy. Money was tight, and building something big was going to take time. But the more I thought about it, the more determined I became. The next morning, I started sketching out a design. It wouldn't just be a swing set. Oh no. I envisioned a real playground, right in our backyard, with a slide, climbing wall, monkey bars, and maybe even a little fort. A place where my kids could run, jump, and laugh without feeling guilty. I kept the plans to myself at first. I didn't want Karen catching wind of it and trying to stop me before I even began. I started gathering materials slowly. I found a used slide online for a fraction of the price and picked it up the next town over. An old friend had some leftover lumber from a deck project and offered it to me for free. I even scored a set of monkey bars from a family who was moving away. Piece by piece, my vision was coming together. Every time I brought something home, I felt a spark of excitement, but I knew the real work was yet to come. I'm not a professional builder, so every step was a learning curve. I spent hours watching tutorials, measuring and remeasuring, making sure everything would be safe. My kids started noticing the pile of wood and equipment in the corner of the yard, asking curious questions. I just told them, "You'll see." Their eyes lit up every time. One afternoon, as I was sanding down a piece of wood, I heard Karen's voice from across the fence. "What are you building?" she asked sharply. I could feel her suspicion in every word. I simply smiled and said, "Just working on something for the kids." She frowned, muttered something under her breath, and disappeared. I could tell she wasn't happy. But that only made me work harder. The first day of construction was rough. The sun was blazing, my hands were sore, and by evening my back felt like it had aged 10 years. But as I started to see the shape of the structure forming, I knew it was worth it. Every screw, every nail, every bead of sweat was an act of defiance against the idea that children should be seen and not heard. I worked late into the evenings, sometimes by the glow of a single work light, just to keep making progress. My kids would peek out the window, waving and grinning, trying to guess what it was going to look like. I could tell they were excited, but they still didn't fully understand just how much fun was coming their way. One night, after I had finished securing the base and the first platform, I sat on the steps of the deck looking at the half-finished playground. The stars were out, and the air was cool. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was winning, not just against Karen, but against the idea that someone else could decide how much happiness my family was allowed to have. But of course, it couldn't stay peaceful for long. A few days later, as I was installing the monkey bars, Karen came storming into her backyard. "That's going to be noisy," she said, glaring at the structure. "You can't just put that there." I reminded her it was my property and that I was well within my rights. Her face turned red and she huffed back inside. I could see her pulling out her phone through the window, no doubt calling someone to complain. That evening, there was a knock at my door. It was a representative from the Homeowners Association. Karen had reported me for building an unsightly structure. I explained that it was a safe, well-designed playground for my children, and I even showed him the plans. After a short inspection, he shrugged and said everything looked fine. I could keep building. I'll never forget the look on Karen's face when she saw him walking away smiling. The next morning, I woke up to something unexpected. My kids were already dressed and standing at the window, watching me grab my tools. "Can we help?" they asked eagerly. I hesitated, but then handed them each a small task, holding pieces of wood, passing me screws, or helping paint the slide's support beams. Their little faces lit up with pride. Suddenly, it wasn't just my project. It was our project. Every day after school, they'd rush out to see what new part we'd added. We built the climbing wall together, painted it bright blue and yellow, and even added handprints along the base as a personal touch. By the time the slide was secured in place, the playground was starting to look like something out of a park. My kids couldn't stop talking about it, and yet I could feel the tension from the other side of the fence. Karen's blinds were always twitching, her presence a shadow over our progress. But I didn't care anymore, because for every glare she sent my way, I had the sound of my kids' laughter ringing in my ears, and that was worth more than her approval ever could be. What I didn't realize then was that the real drama was still to come, because once the playground was finally finished, Karen wouldn't just be upset, she'd be furious, and she was going to try one last thing to shut it all down. The weeks after the playground opened were some of the happiest my kids had ever had. Every afternoon, children from all over the neighborhood would show up, some riding bikes, others running in with smiles that stretched from ear to ear. The air was always filled with the sounds of squeals, the creak of swings, and the thud of little feet running across the grass. Parents would sometimes come too, chatting with me while their kids played. For a while, it felt like the neighborhood had transformed into something warmer, friendlier. But I should have known Karen wasn't done. One Thursday morning, as I was sipping my coffee and watching the kids play before school, I saw her walking up the sidewalk with a stack of papers in her hand. She marched right past the laughing children, right past the parents, and came straight to me. Without even saying hello, she slapped one of the papers into my hand. "This," she said, "is a petition, signed by people who don't want this. Playground here. You've got until the end of the week to take it down. I looked at the paper. Sure enough, there were names on it, about 10 of them. But I noticed something right away. Half the signatures were from people who didn't even live in our neighborhood anymore. One of them had moved years ago. I couldn't help but smile a little. "Karen," I said calmly, "you might want to double-check your list." Her face flushed red. She huffed and turned away, muttering something under her breath about noise and liability. I knew then that this wasn't just about kids playing, this was about control. And if she wanted a fight, she'd pick the wrong parent. The next day, I called the city to make sure I wasn't violating any rules. The official I spoke to told me, "As long as it's on your property and meets safety guidelines, you're fine." I could have hugged that man. It was like a weight lifted off my shoulders. Not only was the playground here to stay, but now I had official confirmation to shut down any of Karen's future complaints. When I told the parents who brought their kids over, they were thrilled. A few of them suggested we host a playground grand opening to celebrate. I loved the idea. We picked Saturday afternoon, set up tables with snacks, drinks, and even a little music. The kids made colorful hand-drawn signs that said things like, "Welcome to the fun zone," and "Thank you, Dad." Saturday came, and our yard was bursting with life. Music played softly in the background. Kids zipped down the slide. Parents chatted over lemonade. It was everything I'd imagined, and more. And then, right in the middle of it all, Karen appeared again. This time, she wasn't alone. She had a clipboard and a man in a suit with her. She marched up with a triumphant smile. "This is a city inspector," she announced loudly, as if she'd just brought in the cavalry. "I filed a complaint." The man in the suit stepped forward, but instead of looking concerned, he looked impressed. "This is the playground." "You called about?" he asked her. Karen nodded, arms crossed. The inspector walked around, checked the equipment, tested the swing chains, and even measured the slide angle. Finally, he came back to us and said, "Everything here is perfectly safe and up to code. In fact, it's pretty great. Wish I had one like this when I was a kid." The look on Karen's face was priceless, like someone had just pulled the rug out from under her. Without another word, she turned and stormed off, the inspector following at a slower, much more relaxed pace. As soon as she was gone, the parents and kids erupted into cheers. Someone handed me a soda, someone else turned. The music up, and the celebration kicked into high gear. I stood there, watching my kids and their friends play, feeling that swell of pride all over again. That night, when the last guest had left and the stars were out, I sat on the bench I'd built and looked at the playground. It wasn't just wood and bolts. It was proof that when you stand up for something good, you can protect it. My kids would grow up remembering not the woman who tried to take away their fun, but the dad who built them a place where happiness lived. And if Karen ever tried again, well, she'd have to take it up with the entire neighborhood now.